The pirates. He woke up to a changed world. Hugh, son of Hugh, grandson of Hugh, and great-grandson of Hugh had lived a terrible life. He had been but a handful of years old when they had all been taken. His mothers and sisters torn away, and that terrible thing that called herself Big Mama came. She had forced things into him, and the world seemed to go bright and cheerful even when it wasn't. There had been women, strange women, many of them had been very, very nice. They had made things better, even when the drugs had worn off and he had been reduced to shivering and horrible, horrible headaches. It had lasted for so long, with only the occasional message from his family. They were hostage against him. If he ran, if he fought, they would be hurt, they would be killed. He had to stay. Everything had been awful and horrible and wrong. Then it had all changed. Days ago, not even a full week ago, and he had been carried out of his stable from where Big Mama had kept him. He had been given medicine that made the headache so very weak and easy to handle. He started to heal, to grow stronger with as much food as he could eat instead of just the scraps that Mama would allow him to stay alive, but not to grow fat. He then thought things were going bad as he met Madame Horny, but she was so very different. Apparently, she had hated Big Mama and was only pretending to be mean to scare her off. There had been men wandering around, a lot of them. Strong men, proud men, men that were equals to the women around them. They were preparing for something. But the headache was still such a distraction. He pushes everything away as he goes for the headache pills beside his bed. There's some water there to help them down, and they sit fairly well. He finishes the water and thinks for a few minutes with his head slowly clearing. Feeling comes back to his scales, and he rubs his arms and legs as a pins and needles feeling pushes through quickly and then fades. There's a knock on his door. That's one of the strange things about his new life. They ask his permission to come in. He considers ignoring it and getting more sleep. It's very tiring just to be awake these days. He shakes his head and gives his whole body a shake. He smooths his pajamas as a bit of a nervous habit. Those are new too. Sleeping in anything but his natural scales was strange, but the expectation of his clothes looking great was something he was still following even if he didn't have to. He walks up to the door and after a moment's of consideration unlocks it from his side. Another new strangeness. He can lock the room. He reaches up to the doorknob and opens it to see what his day is starting with. The sight of his mother and sisters stuns him. "Oh, so I haven't woken up yet," he remarks, and the dream figure of his mother breaks down into helpless giggles before reaching in and pulling him into a hug. This is a dream, right?" he asks. "It's very real. Remember what I taught you? A pinch to wake up?" his mother asks, and he reaches down to the sensitive tip of his tail and gives it a painful squeeze and tug. Nothing changes. She's still here. He slowly returns the hug as a sob starts breaking out. "Shh, shh, it's okay, baby. Mommy's here. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to be better. Mommy and your sisters and your wives, we're all here for you." "This is real? Dreams aren't this. He breaks into further sobs, and he's pulled into a deeper hug into his mother's soft green skin as she hums a soothing tune. "It's real. It's very, very real. Come, your sisters are speaking with your wives. They're getting along well. Did you know that for your sake some of your wives actually helped make this world a better place? The Scorchin and Lynn families are no more for their love of you and others who love those like you." Humir says kindly. "Can I just... It's been so long." Hugh asks, and she nods before snuggling closer. He's changed. She's sort of changed. But things are good anyways. Her scent, her love, her heartbeat are all the same. Then she leads him from the hallway and into the outdoors. There is everyone he knows and loves. They tell him everything and he assures them each time, while also feeling smaller and smaller. They had all been through so much, been hurt so badly. His mother and sisters were slaves. His wives had been slaves in all but name to the Scorchin and Lynn. His family had endured unending horror. His wives had been in the thick of it and had helped break the horrors of the world. He hadn't done anything but wait around to be rescued. Still, what he can do is help make everyone feel better, and that's what he does. That's all he's good for anyways. His repertoire is hugs, calm words of assurance, promises of love, and a very gentle demeanor. But it feels so frail and fragile compared to all their strength. After a time, the guilt eats away at him and he says he's going to get himself a drink of water. He is somewhat thirsty anyways, and it will give him an excuse to not let them see him break down in frustration. He has to persuade them that this is fine and that he can get it himself, and they've done so much already he can fetch a little water. He asks if anyone else wants some, but it's rejected all around as none of them want to burden him. A reminder at just how frail he is. He finishes his excuses and wanders off. He'll claim he got a little lost on the way back if this takes too long. "You look like you've bounced down the side of a mountain," a deep voice says as he's about to enter the building with the nearest kitchen. He looks around in shock before backing up and seeing the man sitting on the roof with his legs crossed. You're Forgy? Foster?" Hugh asks, snapping his fingers to try and make sense of things. "Franklin," he answers. "What are you doing up there?" he asks. "Just sorting my head. Sometimes you feel things that don't make any sense, so you have to sort through it all to put it away properly." He answers before standing up and vanishing to reappear near Hugh. "You're the adept. They said you fought the witches and won," he says in excitement. This is someone who could have gone from drugged and weak to killing Big Mama himself, and then freed his sisters and mom before ripping apart the Scorchin and Lynn with his bare hands to rescue his wives. "Not alone, but yes, I killed them," he answers calmly regarding Hugh oddly. But the implied question remains. "What's wrong?" he asks, and Hugh hangs his head. Even other men can see his frailty. It's shameful. "I'm useless," Hugh admits after a few minutes, and Franklin looks considerate. "How so?" he asks, and the Cobe teenager sighs grandly enough for a being twice his size. "I wasn't able to help anyone, only sit around and wait to be rescued." "Like your mother and sisters?" Franklin interrupts, and Hugh looks up at him. "How did you—" "We men talk among ourselves about strange happenings, odd coincidences, things like that," Franklin responds. "It's just that I was so helpless, not able to do anything without outside help, too scared of what people would do to those I love if I tried anything." "Like your wives and family?" Franklin asks. "I'm trying to have a moment," Hugh snaps as his patience breaks. "Sorry, I'm just trying to fully understand myself. What's the actual problem?" Franklin asks, baffling the young Cobe. "What do you mean? Feeling powerless or helpless or just frustrated all comes from somewhere. I'm chewing, though, a lot myself at the moment. It's mostly irrational, as are a lot of things like it. So the question is, are you feeling something justified? And whether you are or not, how are you going to deal with it?" Franklin explains, and Hugh looks baffled but thinks hard. I feel helpless and weak. I want to be capable and strong, but how do I do that?" Hugh asks after a little while. "Well, what kind of strong are you looking for? Strong character? Strong arms? Strong mind? My team and I can help with all of that. We can give you training. But if you're feeling helpless and useless, then what you should do is help others. Prove to yourself over and over again that you have worth. The violence and bloodshed is almost completely over with on this world. For now, at least. But now we need to rebuild. Now we need to make things safe and secure. And you think I can help with that? Once your head is cleared of all the drugs pumping through you? Yes, I do. You don't need to be big to work construction equipment or to make a meal. Or hell, if you want to be more aggressive, you can get the training needed for more martial pursuits. We will need sheriffs and guards and combat pilots. What? We've taken the world. Now we need to make it worth holding. After that, we need to hold it against other scumbags coming in. Combat pilot? A defense against planetary bombardments and invasions. It'll be rapid response strike fighters to get in and shatter enemy ships before heading back to base. Franklin remarks, and Hugh's mind wanders for a moment as he pictures the sky blurring by before erupting into space to launch a massive barrage of plasma and lasers into the underside of a massive enemy ship. "Wow, what kind of training would that take?" he asks, and Franklin smiles. "A lot of time in a flight simulator and in practice flights to start with. We're basically going to be building these ships out of the fastest ships we stole from the Sky Marauders and strapping the big laser cannons we got out of their stronghold to make them into soaring artillery that's too fast to counter." "And what do you mean by a sheriff?" "Law enforcement with a lot of wiggle room. Basically, they're the person in charge of deciding which laws are most important to pay attention to and which aren't." Of course, that generally means carrying the biggest and meanest weapon possible to scare the more belligerent into stopping their stupidity. Franklin explains, and Hugh considers. What if I could be both? If you were to sign up for such a thing, we'd encourage it. The strike fighters will need to be positioned at strategic points, and every community will need a sheriff. Franklin explains, and Hugh's mind begins to churn before there's a slight spike of pain. You're still in rehab from that shit Big Mama fed you. Take the time to consider before you make any big decision. Only then will we accept an application, Franklin says calmly. But that's in... Ow. Hugh tries a little too hard to think, and the headache returns. A month at most, Franklin says. Just focus on healing for now. Frustration and anger at not somehow pulling off an impossible miracle are common when you come out of a disaster or stressful situation, Franklin says. Believe me, I know. Doesn't mean I like it. You don't have to like it. You have to deal with it, Franklin says, and Hugh looks at him in surprise at the sudden harshness. Franklin merely shrugs. A big part of being strong is to be able to ignore small pains. You want to be strong? Getting over your feelings is part of it. Stand firm even when a tide seeks to bowl you over, be it one of actual water or one of emotion. So you're saying not to feel? Not at all. I'm saying don't be compromised by it. I'm dealing with a lot right now myself, but I'm not letting it stop me. That's one thing that makes me strong, something you can get right now if you want to. I can't just suddenly not feel, Hugh protests. It's not that at all. It's about growing stronger and stronger until you can push it aside, until you can deal with it a bit at a time, Franklin answers. Oh? Looks like I've held you up longer than expected. Madam Humir, I apologize for holding up your son, Franklin says, and Hugh turns to see his mother walking up. Oh no, it's a good thing that he has some men to look up to. There are so few men around that it can be lonely for a young man, Humir says, and Franklin chuckles. Regardless, he was expected and I got in the way of that, I'm sorry, he says before vanishing outright in another teleport. The butler did it. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come and this charity ball hosted by the Olthrax conglomeration must come to a close. But take heart, my friends, for we have successfully raised 2.935 trillion credits, Admiral Cistern announces as the time to close the ball comes along. There's some polite applause for the most part, but a great deal of muttering. A lot of people were more than a little confused as to where Lady Tykenped has gone to. The galaxy over, children are going to be clothed and fed thanks to your incredible generosity and your courage to continue despite the attempted interruptions. I'd like to thank both bands who've played tonight, the Morkiar Classical Orchestra, who unfortunately had to bow out, and their replacements are Bass and Brass, Blues and Jazz Band. A round of applause for both if you'd be so kind, he says before leading the applause himself and getting the entire room to follow along as the band bows. I have to admit, this is the most exciting and entertaining charity event I've ever been to. Ambassador Tal admits with a smile and receives one from Admiral Cistern in return. Although I'll wager someone had something to do with that, she remarks as she glances over her shoulder to see Philip bustling around. Not aware that he's pocketing the weapons and tools for a dozen last-second assassination, blackmail, infiltration, sabotage, and assault attempts. Please avail yourselves of the buffet table one last time if you're so inclined, and do have a safe journey home. He bids them all before stepping away from the microphone after turning it off. Flawless evening, sir, though I must admit having the band bring Thompson's submachine guns is a bit overmuch, Philip remarks as he walks up and vaguely recalls some of his earliest missions as a young pup, with far more balls than brains. He'd actually stumbled onto an unrelated smuggling operation while investigating numerous missing persons surrounding a casino frequented by an oil baron. One thing had led to another, and he had to acquire a Thompson and several drums of ammunition to finish things off. His after-mission cigarette had tasted so very sweet and had paired wonderfully with the wine, though it had not tasted half so well as the Baron's niece. Cultural dress. Philip, cultural dress. The laws for such things are incredibly flexible, and with kinetic weaponry as registered human cultural dress, we're allowed an enormous amount of wiggle room. Thanks to that bit of absurdity, I've managed to have our entire vessel recognized as an unarmed and unarmored transport, with the obvious fallacies in that assumption legally dismissed as cultural artifacts. So long as we don't use laser or plasma weaponry, a human will be considered unarmed at all times. My sword? Cultural dress? The pistols we're both carrying? Cultural dress. As is the garrote, kosh, stiletto, and broken-down rifle. I am aware, sir. I just find it rather brazen and more than a little amusing. Philip admits, and Admiral Cistern merely smiles, even as Ambassador Tal giggles. Now then, sir, perhaps you should escort the young lady home before some untoward rumors begin? We wouldn't want a scandal. Yes, because the several you've orchestrated to distract from your actual schemes won't be known by anyone, Admiral Cistern says with a slight smile as he complies and begins walking out. My goodness, sir, I must admit I haven't the foggiest idea what you're talking about. Philip dismisses after they part from the crowd that's already whispering about how Philip is apparently playing matchmaker. He says this with a slight smile of his own that gives evidence to the simple deception. Of course not. I'm certain it was nothing more than a coincidence that several happy new couples have found their planned place of private entertainment was right in the path of a heist's entrance or egress routes. Admiral Cistern notes when they're well and truly out of earshot of everyone else. And I am certain that the few business arrangements you've made to control 5.25% of the Olthrax conglomeration shares had nothing to do with the sheer success of the ball, Philip says, and Ambassador Tal gasps as everything suddenly fits together. I like to win, Philip, a trait we have in common, Admiral Cistern notes. So that's what you were going for? You've got a 20th share of the company, but why? First off, the shares are very valuable in their own right, and I get a voice in company decisions, something I intend to leverage to control more and more of the company, Admiral Cistern explains. There must be some elements in the company that wanted more than a quick payday. There was a quick payday, too, in fact, but they were mutually exclusive. My opposing conspirators were aiming to pocket the donations for a very respectable amount, nearly 3 trillion credits. I, however, worked with those who wished for the company to receive both a more respectable reputation to ensure long-term profits and earn a tax break roughly half as large. Except this would reflect well on the entire company, and the vast majority of shareholders and workers would profit as opposed to some few at the top and their friends. Admiral Cistern explains, and Ambassador Tal struggles to keep in the giggles. Are all humans so manipulative and skilled, or am I just blessed to know the really fun ones? Ambassador Tal asks with a grin. Philip can clearly see the lightly bubbling lust playing in her demeanor, and he hopes that his little plan with the oysters will play out. Granted, most aphrodisiacs are due to a placebo effect, but the placebo effect has produced wondrous results before and shall again. Not all and not normally, but short of severe developmental disorders, any man or woman of humanity can be trained to the same extent as Admiral Cistern and myself, although a great deal of personal effort and natural talent does help. Philip answers her question with a touch of honest but nonetheless satisfying statements. Not that you're boasting or anything, Admiral Cistern lightly teases. I've given up such childish pursuits long ago, sir. I only claim to be capable of what I know I am capable of, Philip remarks while wrinkling his nose. He adjusts his sleeves and slips out a communicator, a bit of quick typing, and he sets the next portion of his plan into motion. Their walk goes along to more silent halls until they begin approaching Ambassador Tal's office and apartment suite. That's when a slight drifting of melodic strings being gently sought upon by gentle bows. Philip, Admiral Cistern remarks to turn and glare at the butler/spy and finding the man gone. Of course, the cretinous cad. Rude, Philip says from out of sight but not out of earshot. Come on, this isn't going to end without going through the motions, Ambassador Tal prompts as she struggles to keep a smile off her face. The slow play of the violins grows louder as they reach her office and apartment. They're not in sight but undoubtedly present, and the Gobe ambassador can barely fight down her giggles. Ambassador Tal, it's been nothing short of a pleasure and a privilege to be your date this night. I do hope the evening was as much fun for you as it was for me, Admiral Cistern says before shooting a bit of a glare down the way where the music is coming from. It was an absolute delight, though it was a bit of a shame there's nothing to complain about. Well beyond how rude Lady Tycan Ped was, but the spoiled idiot is either rude or condescending if she isn't both at once. How on earth did that woman get herself into her current position? Admiral Cistern asks as he pictures any number of the assassination attempts tonight that had been thwarted, were no doubt aimed at the insufferable woman. If such a thing hadn't collided with his plans or been prone to failure on its own, he would have told Philip to allow them if only to remove the pest without bloodying his own hands. She led a long series of blackmail, bribery, favors, and other such duplicitous actions. It's a pattern with her race in politics, the Pavarus race for an office for the title, and then don't do anything with it. Lady Tycanped wanted to be Speaker of the Council but didn't actually want to do anything with it. She'll fight with everything she has to keep the title, but won't be bothered to pay attention to anything that isn't a danger to her holding it. Ambassador Tal explains before gesturing for Admiral Cistern to come down to her level. He kneels down and she holds up her hands before pausing. It's clear just how much she wants him, how she's just inches away from him before stepping back. I've had an amazing time and want nothing more than for you to follow me into my apartment. But I don't want to ruin this. You've been something out of a dream, which is a pattern I've been finding all over the place for every man off that ship of yours. Pirate gangs turning privateer then hero if rumors are to be believed. Full-on action heroes doubling as bounty hunters and tearing down the hardest jobs like jokes, romances straight out of storybooks and tall tales. I'm in one of those little stories, and I'll be damned if I ruin my big chance, she says, and he smiles before letting out a chuckle. I think that it's time that I move past some of my insecurities and foolishness. Yes, I've had a hard time, but overly cautious is just as bad as overly reckless, he says. I think I'd like to take a chance. If you'd allow me? He asks her and the music picks up. Oh, for goodness sakes, you cretins! Back to the ship on the double! He barks out and the sound of boots hitting the ground replaces the music. I'd love for you to join me. Please come in, she says, opening the door into her apartment. He follows her in and Sir Philip nods in satisfaction. It's unlikely for things to go all the way, but this is a very important and very big step. Sir, it's a damn good thing you're not messing with the betting pools. Otherwise, half the information department would try to skin you alive for that stunt. One of the guards on patrol notes before Harriet flicks her Kutha stub earring to display her actual face to him for a moment. Young lady, what did I tell you about dropping a disguise on a field? He asks irately. Only when completely sure of my surroundings, she answers quickly. And are you completely certain of your surroundings? Philip asks in a cross tone. Yes, she asks, not a good sign. Oh, really? Then you are aware of the spy in your shadow? Philip asks, and she spins around with her gun at the ready, only to find Herbert ducking low to avoid it, prompting a sigh from the proper old spy. That's quite enough out of both of you. Herbert, you need to work on your appearance. The key to good stealth is to also have an excuse to be wherever you are. A ninja suit is plenty fetching, but beyond stage plays and games, the pajamas have got to go, he says before looking back to the sheepish Harriet. Needless to say, you know what you've done wrong, young lady. Yes, sir, both of them say, and he nods before favoring them both with a smile. Regardless, you've both done very well with your initial tasks. Your skills and abilities are coming on nicely. Now head back to your postings. He prompts the two, who each give him a salute and start off. So are those actually your pajamas, or was he just being snarky? Harriet asks Herbert, who chuckles. Both. These are soft, blend with the darkness, and have big pockets for all sorts of little things. I can also wear it at night, and so long as I'm nearby the building, I'm fine to be caught in it. Minus the head bit. Is that a towel? Harriet asks, pointing to the head wrapping. Yes, he answers,